All right, well, welcome back to the Tool World Podcast. I'm your host, David Jew, and I'm here with Master Jew.
Hello there, Mr. Jew.
Hello. All right, this week we are going to talk about diagonal stance.
Diagonal stance.
And I've come up with 3 uses of diagonal stance.
Okay, go.
All right.
What are they?
Well,
Why do you spend a lot of time thinking about these things, huh?
yeah,
Good.
got to come prepared for these videos. All right, now the
The
first
7
one.
wonders of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go.
Well, maybe you should guess. What 3 can you come up with?
Oh,
And maybe they're,
on the spot?
maybe they're different than mine. Maybe we can make it 4 or 5.
Oh, now you're really trying to make me think here. One would be the one in Juche Kodan where you land.
There you go. So landing in the diagonal stance.
Sejong.
Okay. And what is that?
You move from, I forget, I can't think of the technique.
But you're stepping
You're stepping
into a
the
diagonal stance, right? The last one I came up with is you use diagonal stance to change it to walking stance.
And what pattern is that?
Sawmill.
Sawmill. Oh.
You do back elbow and then you change to walking stance.
That's
press and
right.
walk.
But that's interesting because what is diagonal stance really?
Yeah, that's what we're here to talk about, right?
Yeah.
Because why would you not just do a sitting stance? That's the question, right? Let's look at the first one with jumping from Injuche Kodan, 2-directional kick. I could land in a sitting stance, technically. I mean, it's not very far off. But why do we do diagonal stance?
Right. So when we look at diagonal stance, let's take a look at what the definition is, right? Mm-hmm. So sitting stance, we go back to that. Sitting stance, the feet are parallel to each other. The toes line up with each other. The heels line up with each other.
Yeah, if you do a
But the
good job.
diagonal stance, you take 1 foot forward, or basically 1 foot. So if my toes are lined up, my back of my heel on my left leg would line up with the toes of my right foot.
Yeah.
And vice versa, right? It could be that. And that would be called a left diagonal stance. And if you switch it where the right foot's forward and the back of the heel lines up with the toes, that'd be a right diagonal stance. They are kind of the similar stance,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of like a horse stance, except when you ride a horse, they don't put one stirrup forward and one back.
Well, horse stance would be sitting stance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I was just trying to go back to that, horse stance.
Okay. All right. So let's keep going. What is the diagonal stance? Why would you choose that over the sitting stance for the jumping?
Well, like in Juche, Kodam, I don't want to make it like one word.
Yeah.
It depends on which organization or what you're calling it.
Yeah.
We call it Kodam. Kodam
Yeah,
2.0.
Yeah.
I call it Kodam 2.0. Anyway, so you're doing a 2-directional kick where you do a twisting kick and a side piercing kick. And so when you jump up, you're kind of leaning in that direction. But when you land, you don't actually have, technically, I think, if you did it really properly and you really stretch it out, the natural landing position would be 1 foot forward, the left foot forward, and the right foot is slightly back. And you basically would land in the diagonal stance just because of the previous position or the previous technique, which is that 2-directional kick.
Okay.
I think that's really what it is.
So just body positioning.
Body
where you
positioning, right? It's just a matter of time. Could you jump up, kick, and swing that back forward? You can. It's not as easy, though, I think. Although I think a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
And that's because they're not really performing that technique properly.
Okay.
They jump up and they kind of throw the left kick out this over to the left and the other
Yeah.
kick kind of over to the right.
Yeah.
And they just land, and they land in the sitting stance.
Yeah.
It's not really the way it really should be performed. If you look at the 2-directional kick, right, you're really leaning into it. You're really stretching it out for that twisting kick, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the reason. I mean, it's kind of like doing flying twin front snap kick, right? When you look at that, most people land basically in the parallel stance. They don't land in the guarding position with the or L stance.
Yeah.
And I think it's just harder. It's a much harder technique for someone to do that, to be able to do the kick in the air, reposition the body, and then land.
Yeah, like you're ready.
Like you're ready. And
Yeah.
that's the way you should do that,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of like people doing, like in Chungma, where they jump up and they spin around. Well, a lot of times the legs are down. It's like, well, why are they down? lazy. I don't know.
Yeah.
Where the knee has to be up. Or maybe it just wasn't taught to them. Then you have to get the bat out and sweep their leg.
Yeah.
And then they go, oh, okay, I will get my leg up. Otherwise, I'm going to get swept again.
All right, let's move on. Number 2, we're changing from diagonal stance into walking stance versus starting in sitting stance, changing into walking stance. And you see that in Juche,
Right?
Kodang.
That's right.
And then you see the diagonal stance to walking stance in Samil. So, why?
Well, that makes a difference too, because of the foot position. When you go into the walking stance, doesn't that really kind of take the directions a little bit differently?
Yeah.
Because if you're in a sitting stance and then you rotate into that walking stance, it's going to be a slight different angle, right?
Yeah.
And when you're in the diagonal stance, and when you do that, again, both those people that are just listening, you'll have to imagine this. I'm still imagining it myself. I'm not demonstrating.
Well,
it.
okay. So, what pattern were you talking about?
Well, like in Juche,
Because you're in the cross cut.
Right, you're in
And then you're going to do the elbow strike.
Right.
So we're at the beginning of the pattern.
Right. So it's that, the feet rotates into that walking stance. And the walking stance is still a walking stance. It's just that it doesn't look normal because when we look at stances, when we look at it from like straight on, and now you're doing a pattern, and all of a sudden it looks like, it's kind of weird because it's not like straight on, because it's just going in a different direction. It's what it is. It's still a walking stance, but it's that direction. So when you're in a diagonal stance, because the foot is forward, it's that rotation or that direction is a little bit different.
Yeah,
That's the main
difference more.
That's the main difference.
Now, follow-up question on that: whether you're in sitting stance into the walking or the diagonal into the walking, do we still do the sine wave down, up, down, or is it a faster type of movement where I just go and shift it? Not shift, but pivot fast. Both patterns, Juche/Kodang and Samil, it just says forming.
Right.
So you go from the sitting stance walking, diagonal walking, you're forming this, right?
Right.
It's not fast, not continuous. Do we still do this down, up, down sine wave motion? Because you can say that it's a lot faster. You just go bam, you're in that stance.
I still think, well, okay, is sine wave really defined as down, up, down? When we do sitting stance, we kind of do that when we're punching, but that's not always the case, is it? So, for instance, in warang, where you go high side block and you bring the heel up because the legs are straight, and then so that's kind of an up and down movement. We see sine wave done because of in-out stepping, we're moving forward. We see sine wave like when we move from L stance to walking stance or vice versa, but sometimes we see you're in a walking stance and you slip into, is there sine wave? There is still sine wave because you're lifting your body up and then you're dropping, but you don't go down, up, down. Okay, so I don't think you always do down, up, down in some cases. And in this case, what you're doing is you're in a sitting stance. You have to actually go up. You have to bring that heel up a little bit at least to form that walking stance. You have to kind of lift that. You can't just slip. Oh, I guess you could.
Yeah.
You could slip, but you still have to lift that heel up a little bit.
Yeah.
No matter what. And I kind of think that that's also true anyway. Like if you're in sitting stance, can your feet move around? That's one of the things that I keep saying. Can the feet move around when you do that?
Yeah.
And the rule, you don't really violate the rules of eyes, hands, feet, breath together, because that only at that point in time does it have to be together. But I'm not lifting my foot, right? I'm just shifting. But in order to do that, you really do have to bring the heel slightly off, even if it's touching. You got to take the pressure off the heel to move into that. So I think there's still sine wave because you're still in that sitting stance. You kind of have to kind of come up and then down to do the.
Okay. And same goes for the diagonal stance.
Right.
Okay. So it's not like a quick movement.
Well, it is quick.
Yeah,
It's a lot faster. Yeah. It's a lot faster. It's almost like when you do fast motion, the way I define fast motion.
Yeah.
We don't need to go
Yeah,
over that.
that might be another day. All right, let's go over the third time that we see this, and that is when we're stepping. And obviously, there can be more uses for diagonal stance. I mean, these are just the 3 I came up with,
Right.
fast. And we see this one in Sejong.
Well, maybe, but there was a rock in that spot, and so you didn't want to step on the rock, so you did diagonal stance instead.
Uh-huh. So yeah, I think you're in a sitting stance, right? And you step behind, and then the other foot just steps straight across, and you end up in the diagonal stance, right?
That's right.
And it's interesting because I think most times you will actually just do like an X stance. So I step across, I make the X stance, I perform technique, and then I move to the next technique, maybe sitting stance. I think that's how you most of the time see it. But this time is different. I'm stepping, I don't actually cross the feet. They just line up right behind each other, and then the other one steps straight across into the diagonal stance.
Do we call that an X stance? The answer is no.
No, because it's not an X, it doesn't make an X.
It doesn't make the X stance. And some people actually perform that particular technique like an X stance. And so that would be technically incorrect, and so you should mark them off. Incorrect, fail them. And you know, it's interesting because X stance, I've always kind of think of X stance as kind of like an intermediate position from one position to another. However, X stances are also used with a combination of a technique, like a block. Like if you think of like Poan or something.
Yeah, or a strike.
Striking, or you jump.
Yeah.
And generally, that jumping is, the foot is behind the other foot, more like it, kind of like a balance to help balance that, right? But there's a technique that's involved in there, whereas in Sejong, it's actually just a movement. You're moving from one position to another. And in reality, you don't really want to cross your legs too much. You could get tripped up, right?
Yeah.
So like in boxing, don't cross your legs because you could get tripped up. And so in Sejong, you're just stepping. So there's no movement, there's no applications, unlike X stances.
The interesting thing about Sejong is that you actually step behind.
Right.
And most times when we're stepping in X stance, we actually step in front.
In front.
So
that's right.
it's I have nothing else to add to that, but that was interesting.
One is there a reason one versus? Well, yeah, I think that's a good question as well. I think when you do the jumping, it's behind it. It makes a lot of sense because you're kind of flying forward, and you
really hard
actually
to get,
land. And then the other foot kind of sits down for that balancing purpose. For stepping, does it make a difference?
Yeah, I think it depends on that balance. I mean, you just said like,
Stepping
somebody
across in front
hits. Yeah, if you're behind
better?
it, you don't really have that kind of support behind you.
Well, that's a good reason.
Yeah, well, no, I don't know. Anyways,
Don't
all right.
take our word.
Yeah, let us know your guys' thoughts on the uses of diagonal stance. And as always, don't forget to be safe.
Keep training.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Take one.